All right, so we're diving into Bergamot. I just had to bring it in for a smell, and if you have it here with you handy, go ahead and just bring that up for yourself to integrate. And being that we're at the equinox, fall equinox, we have a spring equinox and a fall equinox, and equa, meaning equal distance and equal light and shadow or darkness, right? Our days are unequal, is what that's symbolizing. And so we have these polarizing points. And so as we come into fall, we acknowledge that on that true equinox, which is traditionally around September 22nd, 21st, 22nd, it's saying that the light and the darkness of the day are unequal. When we come into fall, though, we know that we're starting to fall into those longer days of darkness. And so there's something about the vitality in summer, that we have the radiation, we have the natural sunlight. But I love to think about that as we start to come into the darkness of the season, that we bring something that's going to bring a little bit of brightness, especially as we transition. And so if you've worked with me for any number of years, you know bergamot is almost always my first point and my first oil when I'm doing sessions, or it's my purse oil, as I often talk about. And I choose this oil as a companion plant because it really has this beautiful ability to bring balance into the noise of life. So what do I mean by that? So when I consider a client coming in here, I'm often thinking that they're coming off the street, coming from work, coming from home, and they have all that has happened to them and around them for the entirety of the day. And just like all of us, we have to take that moment to take the edge off. Some of us doom scroll, others of us, have practical resources. Maybe we drink a couple of lemon balm tea. Whatever it may be, there has to be that transition that happens. And bergamot to me is this beautiful oil of transition because of what it does in this balancing sense. And so if we've had a really loud, impactful day, bergamot is going to give us this invitation to sort of slide back. If we've had more of a calming, maybe we've had a day where we've just been inside reading all day, but we sort of need to pick our energy up now, bergamot is also going to have that ability to help us begin to sort of raise and re-energize. So I don't want to jump ahead, but we're going to be working with a point that is also balancing in nature. What I want to talk about, though, with bergamot is the ways that it works. And so first of all, let's talk about what bergamot is. Bergamot is the fruiting body of a bitter orange and a lemon, so it's a hybridized fruit. And it's specifically the peel. And why I think bergamot really pairs well as sort of this beginning oil is thinking about putting your thumbnail into the flesh of an oil skin, or an orange skin, or any citrus peel, right? And we get that little burst, that sort of like spritz. It often catches us by surprise. And there's nothing like that particular sensation, as well as the smell that arises with that sensation, to bring us into the present moment. And so what bergamot does so well is it brings us into the present moment, right? So whether we've been sort of quiet and tired all day, or we've been in the noise of the world, bergamot's going to help us to quiet that noise, come in here more and more and more closely to ourselves. Because once we can quiet the noise of the outer world, everything that it demands of us and from us, we can really begin to build a relationship with this inner world, which, again, coming back to our intention for this journey, is really what it's all about. It's about coming home, that fall return back to ourselves, and the return back to our energy. So a couple of things. You have these handouts. First of all, I didn't mention that in the intro video, but you have these handouts. So I'm not going to necessarily read from this, but there's a lot of beautiful resources, including some of the key benefits. And so one of the things that I love about bergamot, when I have somebody on the table, and even if they're not necessarily coming from a place of nervous system disruption, there's always this sense of ease, of sort of feeling like the journey begins. It's almost like we can't really start aroma fusion until we started with bergamot. And so again, I really like to think about this oil as a transition. But within that, bergamot en chemin specifically, which is our traditional acupoint we're going to be working with, it balances the central nervous system. It breaks cycles of overdrive. like coffee dependence. So if you're getting into those pumpkin spice latte worlds, maybe this will help you sort of come down from some of the need for that. Brings focus to scattered and unproductive work, opens perspective, shifting the rigid viewpoints, clears agitation and stagnation into calm, right? So that's like that heat kind of can help release, just like putting that thumbnail into the skin of the orange. It's like this burst of sort of like an off-gassing, if you will. And then it unwinds maladaptive coping rooted in family patterns, right? So those conditions, and as I'm recording this, we're in eclipse season. There's a lot of frenetic energy going on out in the world, but I'm sure we're often also experiencing that in our inner worlds. And so these are times to clear and transmute things that really aren't serving us, or old stories that really continue to hold us back in the ritual of living. And then the last little benefit that I'll share here is that it liberates through a deeper understanding of balance. And I just want to name that because I just spent a month talking about Bergamot in my sixth sense journey. So let me reread that last point. Liberates through deeper understanding of balance. I'm going to just quickly touch on this because I think there's a misconception of what balance is. I think just like the happiness conundrum that we have in this culture, we think that when things get easier, we're going to feel imbalanced. And the truth is that what we actually have the invitation to do, balance is not finite. It is a sphere of influence in and around us that we have the ability to feel structurally sound and able to cope with what is going on in our world. So there's never necessarily going to be less that's going to allow us to be balanced per se. But this idea is that Bergamot is going to help to quiet the noise so that we can actually begin to come into the realm of influence that allows us to feel that sense of balance. And I want to ask you this because I think this is important. I mentioned this in one of my in-person groups recently. And maybe even just close the eyes for a moment. Let's actually just take a breath together. Let's take a big inhale through the nose and out the mouth. And I want you to go into your somatic body, this felt sense, this language of the body, and I want you to actually feel or reach for or remember what balance feels like in the body. What does it actually feel like to feel balanced? And this is important because if we don't recognize what balance feels like in the body, we don't actually have a baseline for what we're reaching for at any given time when we say we're craving a sense of balance. What does balance feel like in the body? Or when's the last time that you remember feeling, and maybe if we reframe this with different words, that you had it all together, everything was operating, no balls were falling off the table. It wasn't this edge of just trying to keep up. And if you can't quite get to that felt sense, we're going to, in a moment, introduce Bergamot, and maybe you'll, for a moment, be able to experience that sense of balance and a bit of freedom from dis-ease in the mind, the body, that can begin to etch upon you and help you begin to memorize what balance actually can feel like in the body. So let's go ahead and try that. Let's experience with this. But I do feel like it's important, and I do want to drive this home, that if that feels a bit elusive for you, I want you to start to collect evidence in the everyday world. Start to watch yourself, be an observer of self as part of these practices, right? I want you to begin to experience those times where there is true contentment. I think that's another reframe for what balance is, or at least what we're craving through this idea of balance. Because once we have a baseline, and we'll talk about baselines a little bit more with the next oil, But once we really have a baseline and an understanding for something, a felt sense of what we actually want to have, we can really begin to recognize those times where the polarity of life, the duality of life, begins to tip us too far in one direction or the other. And if you really want to go deeper on this concept, again, you can go into the Legacy Journey of Sixth Sense, which is in the same course portal. And the very first oil that we touch upon for an entire month is talking about balance in a very intentional space, and living and building and breathing and the practices of what it means to feel that sense of balance. So if this is a curious thing for you, I would really encourage you to check that out. So for now, let's go ahead and come into our anointing journey with bergamot. Always nice to take a little smell of it and just let that citrus burst find you. And then we're going to be working on the ear today. So ear shen men specifically, there's 2 shen mens on the body, but this is a balancing point. We're going to do both sides, so bilaterally. Pinky finger is often best, so you'll just in a moment take 1 drop of oil. We can go ahead and start doing that together. Press those pinkies together, and we'll go ahead and come into both sides on that ear fold. If it's hard to see on the video, you can reference the worksheet for this. See if you can sit back into the tailbone. If you need to lean back into a chair, that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to quiet the voice, and I just want you to start to notice what you notice, where the finger touches the oil and the oil comes to meet the ear. You can stay with this for as long as you like. 1 to 3 minutes is often sufficient. Bring bergamot in for one more smell. And just take a moment, let yourself integrate, notice, marinate. And it's always wonderful when you start working with these practices to make some notes. I like to liken these essential oils or any plant spirits that we're working with as sort of ingredients or spices to our life. And so based on what you're feeling through this experience, you may start to recognize times that you'll want to gravitate towards bergamot specifically. The other thing that I didn't mention with this sequence journey is you may find one of these oils really speaks to you, and that is your oil for this season. And that's wonderful, amazing. Work with it until it feels like you're done with it. Or this is designed to be a sequence where you can come to these oils in this particular sequence, meaning all 4 oils, as many times as you like through the fall months. And even if you turn to this in spring, it's not going to do anything wrong. It's just this particular theme is built around the energetics and the emotional body for this particular season. But like the next oil I'll introduce to you, I often find myself using it in summer. So it's interesting that it wanted to come through for fall. So let's go ahead and let's jump over to cedarwood, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that might be.